what is going on in the world, what is going on in Ukraine. With us today is Dr. William J. Parker. He was a Navy man, a long time in the Navy, and he was the president and CEO of the East-West Institute and so many other things. And good morning, Mr. Parker. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. Great to be back on your show.
Well, you have world experiences and you've seen it all in the last 37, 40 years. Uh, what's going on in Ukraine? What's going on in Russia? I mean, I understand Mr. Putin was on television on Friday talking about that they should not fear nuclear war with him.
Well, I tell you, there's a lot going on with Putin and in Ukraine. Over 14,000 dead, and I think that number is actually a lot higher. Good news is the Russians are withdrawing out of the Western Oblast right now. The Southern Command of Russia has deployed another 2,000 people, and that's really only to try to hold the line while they withdraw from Western Kherson. So it's a very interesting time for sure. But Russia has also threatened to bomb a dam, the Kakova hydroelectric power plant. That could have significant repercussions on the water supply and on the nuclear power supply within Ukraine. So lots going on right now. In addition to his threats of possibly using weapons of mass destruction.
There's so many stories going back and forth. Who do you believe more?
I certainly believe that there's a combination of things happening, but the reality is that the Russians are being defeated on a regular basis in an embarrassing way. At the same time, you have to watch what's going on right now, where the Russians are now trying to bring in 20 to 30,000 commandos, Afghan commandos that were trained and equipped by the United States. And so our hasty departure out of Afghanistan is potentially going to have an impact, a direct impact on what's going on in Ukraine at the same time.
Now, the Hungarian foreign minister the other day in Washington said the Ukraine war would never have happened if President Trump was still president. Was the withdrawal from Afghanistan and the turning over of Afghanistan to the Taliban and to China, did that hasten Putin to go into the Ukraine?
Absolutely. When you go back and look at it, I mean, the reality is that under the Obama administration, you had the loss of Crimea, and then Trump came in and said, "Don't even think about it. Don't even think about it." And so then the election happened, and then President Biden took over, and then you started seeing the massing of forces on the border, and that was really to tell the United States and NATO, I'm thinking about doing this. What are you going to do about it? When nothing happened, when we didn't bring in Ukraine into NATO and some other decisions that could have been made, the decision was, if it's ever going to be a time to go, it's now. And so the Russians rolled in. The interesting part is, if you look at what's going on, I mean, India's Modi has said that Russia is his closest and most significant military ally, and in fact has bought 65 to 80% of the Indian weapons out there are purchased from Russia. They continue to buy oil from Russia, and at the same time, less than 10% of the votes that the Indians have made over the last decade have been aligned with the United States on issues that have to do with national security. So it's a very interesting dynamic right now between India, the United States, China, Russia, and other countries. But that Indian one is one for us to watch very carefully as we continue to build our relationship and understand that we have given some Indian officers access to the Pentagon, et cetera. I think we're dancing a very fine line there on that one.
Well, we're dancing a very fine line with India that doesn't want to be an enemy with China, doesn't want to be an enemy with Russia. But isn't Turkey in the circumstance? When they wake up in the morning, they decide which side they're on?
Well, Turkey is in many ways in the same situation. It's a very good point you make, John. And in particular, when you look at Erdogan and the issues with the S-400 missile that he bought from the Russians, and we were not happy about that at all, and negotiated on how that should stop. The issues with Greece and Greece providing weapon systems to Ukraine with the understanding that they would have 40 new weapon systems provided to them from Germany, which had been slowly re-equipped there into Greece. So yeah, I mean, there's a fine line being played, as you mentioned, Turkey, though, because they are a NATO ally. They are the second largest army in NATO, and yet they have to balance, and they are balancing, I think, the issues of Russia, their close neighbor, and NATO and the United States, their ally.
And Iran. One of the reasons that Saudi Arabia is so upset or annoyed at Washington is them continuing to talk about Iran and mending fences with them. What say you?
What say I is that I think we made a huge mistake several years ago on the JCPOA. I think that you have to first go in with strength and say the nuclear weapons capability, the development of nuclear weapons needs to go away. The problem with this is that when you go back and you look at the fact that in 1991 we signed an agreement, Clinton, Putin, and Ukraine signed an agreement that if Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, at the time they were the third largest nuclear state in the world, that the United States, Russia, and other countries would make sure that Ukraine was protected. The rest of the world is watching that. Nobody's talking about it, but the rest of the world is watching that carefully, and they're watching what we're doing with North Korea. They're watching the fact of expansion in Japan, in Iran, and they're watching what is going to happen on the peninsula with Japan, South Korea, and North Korea.
Doctor, we have 1 minute left. What else you want to tell the American people? Because the American people, when got 9 days to go to the election. And
well, I'll tell you, yes, sir, I'd be very concerned about a couple things. One, 25 days of diesel supply left in the United States. I'd be concerned about that. I'd be keeping a very close eye on the significant change in the nuclear posture review, where in 2018 we said we needed the sea-launched cruise missiles nuclear capability. Now we've gone back with the new NPR and the new nuclear posture review and said we do not need those. I think we need to look at these things very carefully. But oil is going to be a major issue here in the United States, not just for the politics, but for the reality of moving stuff around the country to include things.
I agree with you. If President Biden doesn't open up North America, we got a problem. Well, thank you so much, Dr. William Parker, and continue to seek peace for our entire world and for our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Great being back on your show.